1 hour breaks uptime math. At 99.86% uptime, a 1 hour outage can stay above a single EC2 credit line while still blowing through a 99.99% monthly error budget. The contract can stay calm while the workload and the business are already on fire. This is no tech. When 1 hour of downtime hits a single EC2 instance, what does the cloud actually pay back, and what does the business actually lose? When we hear the word downtime, we usually picture a disaster. We imagine a backhoe severing a fiber optic cable outside a data center. We picture a facility losing grid power during a severe storm, plunging the server racks into darkness. We assume the term only applies to catastrophic crashes that make industry headlines. But in computing and telecommunications, the definition of downtime is much simpler and much more common. It is simply a period when a system is unavailable. Unavailability is just the proportion of time a system is unavailable or offline. This means downtime usually results from two very different things: an unplanned failure or routine maintenance. Open a standard service status page. When a region goes dark due to a hardware fault, the dashboard turns red, and that is clearly an unplanned failure. But look closely at the amber warnings. When you see a maintenance window note warning that a database will be offline for a mandatory security patch, that is also downtime. The system is unavailable to the user regardless of whether the engineering team planned for it or panicked over it. A scheduled reboot drops active connections just as effectively as a power failure. This distinction matters deeply because of how we budget for reliability. Engineering teams build architectures around strict availability targets, assuming that if they hit the target, the business is safe. But there is a massive gap between what the engineering team measures, what the provider guarantees, and what the business actually feels during an outage. How can a 1 hour outage be serious enough to burn a monthly error budget, yet still fail to trigger meaningful compensation? Keep that in mind. We'll do the math after the SLA itself makes the rules clear. To understand the gap, we have to look at how infrastructure is actually measured. Move from the service status page to the architectural design document. The industry standard for measuring reliability is the concept of nines. 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines. These numbers sound incredibly reassuring to a buyer signing a contract. Many people assume 5 nines means no outages whatsoever, but very high availability targets still allow some outage time. 99.9%, 99.99%, and 99.999% still translate into time you can count on a calendar. Let us look at the actual arithmetic of these promises. If your system targets 99.9% availability, 3 nines, you're accepting about 8 hours, 45 minutes, and 57 seconds of downtime per year. That is nearly an entire business day where the system can be completely offline while still meeting its target. If you target 99.99%, 4 nines, your annual error budget shrinks to just 52 minutes and 35 seconds. And if you target 99.999%, 5 nines, you're allowed barely 5 minutes of unavailability for the entire year. This means a single 1 hour outage completely destroys a 99.99% annual target in one afternoon. Even physical infrastructure classifications have strict mathematical limits. You might see data centers advertised as Tier 3 or Tier 4. These classifications strictly measure site infrastructure availability, requiring redundant power and cooling paths to keep the physical servers running during maintenance or localized faults. A Tier 4 facility might have 2 independent utility paths and fault-tolerant cooling, But a bad configuration deployment can still take the application offline. But Tier 3 and Tier 4 are not zero downtime guarantees for your software. They are reliability targets for power and cooling, not promises of perfect system availability. When complex systems interact, failures propagate in ways that bypass redundant hardware entirely. That fragility is exactly why the broken protocol routing the internet matters here. When the routing layer slips, the outage clock starts running long before anyone talks about credits. The infrastructure can be perfectly powered, but if the routing fails, the system is still offline.
The business experiences downtime, the era budget burns, and the engineers scramble to restore service. So, the hour is lost, the budget is burned, and the business wants to know what the cloud provider will do about it. Now move from the architectural diagram to the billing console. Let us look at the single EC2 SLA sheet. This is the document that turns an outage into a credit problem instead of a business loss problem. When a server goes offline, many customers assume the cloud provider will reimburse the real business cost of an outage. They expect a check for the lost sales, the wasted labor, and the damaged reputation. But the AWS EC2 SLA in the provided bundle describes service credits for certain unavailable instances. It does not describe compensation for lost revenue, labor, or downstream operational harm. The provider is selling compute cycles, and their remedy is limited strictly to those cycles. Look closely at the rules for a single EC2 instance. AWS defines an instance as unavailable for calculation purposes if it lacks external connectivity for more than 6 minutes of a clock hour. But it does not zero out the cost of that hour automatically. You must proactively file a claim. If your instance goes offline at 2:10 p.m. and comes back at 2:18 p.m., you cross that 6-minute threshold. That specific clock hour is now logged as unavailable toward your total monthly uptime calculation. If an outage starts at 2:58 p.m. and ends at 3:05 p.m., it spans 7 minutes. But because it crosses the top of the hour, it might not trigger the 6-minute rule for either the 2 p.m. or the 3 p.m. clock hour. But what happens when the outage is much larger? Suppose your instance is down for exactly 1 hour during a critical business day. That hour of downtime feels catastrophic to the product team. But look at the monthly math on that same single EC2 SLA sheet. In a standard 30-day month, there are 720 hours. If your instance is down for 1 hour, your monthly uptime is 719 out of 720 hours. That equals 99.86% uptime for the month. The research bundle notes that AWS offers a 10% service credit if monthly uptime falls below 99.0%. To hit that 99.0% threshold, your instance would need to be down for more than 7 hours in a single month. The bundle also notes a 30% credit if uptime falls below 95.0%, which requires over 36 hours of downtime. Your 1-hour outage, the one that destroyed your 99.99% annual error budget, leaves you at 99.86%. You log 1 unavailable hour, but because credits require you to manually file a claim, and you do not qualify for the 10% monthly credit line anyway, you receive nothing. The contradiction is built right into the math. An hour can break uptime math without breaking the credit threshold. The cloud bill measures a service event, while the business measures a failure cascade. If the SLA only covers the compute cycle, where does the rest of the cost land?
Move from the billing console to the incident response room. You will often see vendor reports claiming that 1 hour of downtime has a universal dollar cost. They might say every hour offline costs exactly $300,000 across the board. But the cost of 1 hour of downtime varies widely by sector, system, and moment. In this source set, most figures are survey-based, case-specific, or tied to a single company rather than a universal benchmark. A 1-hour outage at a global trading firm costs vastly more than a 1-hour outage at a regional logistics company. The true cost is measured in downstream impact. Consider historical precedents where infrastructure failures cascaded into massive business disruptions. On January 15, 1990, the AT&T long-distance network suffered a massive crash. This was attributed to faulty software installed on the number 4 ESS toll tandems throughout the network. A minor fault triggered a reset, and that reset message cascaded to neighboring switches, dropping millions of calls and halting business across the country. Or look at May 2017, when a British Airways IT failure reportedly affected about 75,000 customers. That outage caused hundreds of flight cancellations, stranding passengers, and creating a logistical nightmare that took days to untangle. In both cases, the cost of the unavailable compute hardware was a tiny fraction of the actual economic damage.
The Uptime Institute's 2022 Annual Outage Survey captures this reality perfectly. In that survey, more than 60% of reported outages caused losses above $100,000, and about 15% of those reported outages exceeded $1 million in losses. Those numbers represent lost transactions, idle workforce hours, emergency engineering overtime, and regulatory fines. When a checkout cart fails, the customer does not wait for the server to reboot. They simply go to a competitor. None of those costs are covered by a service credit line. So we return to our delayed question. How can a 1-hour outage be serious enough to burn a monthly error budget, yet still fail to trigger meaningful compensation? Because credits measure uptime, budgets measure trust. The cloud provider is only responsible for the dial tone, but you are responsible for the conversation. The story of downtime is a story of misaligned measurements. Downtime is unavailability, whether it comes from failure or routine maintenance. AWS EC2's public SLA offers service credits for certain unavailable instances, not lost revenue reimbursement. And 99.9%, 99.99%, and 99.999% still translate into time you can count on a calendar. Bring back that single EC2 SLA sheet. An hour of downtime can be too small to pay out much in service credits and too large to ignore in a reliability budget, which means the cloud's remedy and the business's damage are not measuring the same failure. If downtime can be tolerated by a credit policy but still burn through a 99.99% error budget, what else in modern infrastructure is being priced at the wrong layer? We follow the numbers, contracts, and failure modes behind compute infrastructure, so the cost of unavailability is measured as it actually lands. Compare your single EC2 instance policy against the 6-minute unavailable hour rule, and tell us which threshold your incident process is built around. See you on the next postmortem.